We are now recording. So this is a tool. Good morning and namaste. We are going to go through two presentations. We're going to take about half an hour. This is the last presentation this morning. Our time is somewhat limited on this end, so we're going to end, and then we will be following up on the forum afterward. So I wanted to go through part of this introductory presentation on what is manasa. What are the Ayurvedic topics related to the mind? The Sanskrit word for mind is manas, and manasa means the things that are of or related to the mind. So let's begin. So, manyate anena manaha. Many words in Sanskrit are defined using Sanskrit terms, especially verbs. So that by which we consider things, by which we know things, that is called manas, or mind. Now, if you think about that, really what we're saying is that mind is the seat of consciousness. Our awareness is the mind. And in a very greater sense, some of the other terms for mind, such as sattva. Sattva literally means existence. It means where we're living. Also, atma. Atma means the soul, or the spiritual spark that motivates us. And when it leaves, we say that someone has died. That is also a synonym for the mind. So, manyate anena manaha. That by which we do our knowing, by which we do our understanding, by which we feel things, that is the mind. What is the location of the mind? It is situated in the heart, but it's present all over. How is it present? The mind permeates our entire body through the circulation of pran, through the 5 types of pran. You know, when we say pran, we sometimes are referring to one of the 5 types of pran, but pran also refers to the general of the 5 primary and 5 secondary pran. Prana, pan, saman, vyan, udan, and then the Dhananjaya, Devadatta, Krikara, Kudama, and so forth. So our consciousness goes throughout the whole body. This is according to Ayurveda. And the mind is not an independent entity. We talk about the mind in an analytic way. We talk about the mind in terms of, the function of the mind, but really it's a reflection of our living tendency. There is a saying in Vedanta Sutra, Anandamayo Bhyasat. Anandamayo Bhyasat means that by nature, by our very existence of the Atma, we seek pleasure, we seek anand. Anand means a bit more than pleasure. It means we're seeking an unadulterated type of bliss. And the mind reflects this, because what is it that the mind is looking for? It is the center of all the senses. It's inseparable. It's an inseparable component of the linga sharir, or the deha. So it's something that you can't really separate from your senses, because what we experience in our senses is what is really experienced in the mind. Some of the synonyms for mind, we're going to talk about this more in depth as we go through this. Some of the synonyms for mind are chitta, chetas, sattva, atindriya. Also, atma is also a synonym for mind. So atindriya, one of these synonyms, means that the mind is the 11th indriya. So we have 10 senses altogether, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, sight, touch, sound, taste, smell, and we have 5 working senses: the ability to do work, the ability to move, the ability to evacuate and urinate, and the ability to procreate. These are in our power of speech. So we have 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses. But the mind is a tool, both for the sensory and the motor organs. In other words, all of our perceptions are taking place in the mind, and all of our action is originating in the mind. There's also another synonym, anuttva. Anuttva means that the mind is very minute. It means it's very subtle. It's sukshma. We cannot see it, but we can judge it by its presence or absence. You know, there's a whole body of science that deals with trying to understand the mind, and it's all by inference. It's all by, you know, well, I'll ask you a question. How do you feel about your mother? And see what your response is, and how does your face twitch when you talk about it? You know, and even when you say, well, oh, I have a great relationship with my mother, and then the person says, oh, yeah, right, okay, I see exactly what's going on here. This is the mind. The mind is sukshma. You don't have a way of weighing it or measuring it with a tape measure. You can only judge it by its presence or absence, and you can also infer by the way we respond. How do we use the mind? Do we have to think about using the mind? No. For example, we read a book. We don't have to concentrate. We don't have to really pay attention to the functions, but we experience it. So, you know, you could be reading something, and reading is a specific example because in reading, we are actually creating the whole scenario in our mind. It's not quite the same as if we're watching a movie or a TV show. Our vision sense is involved. If we're reading a book, all that we're doing is we're taking words in, and in our mind, we may be seeing pictures. So that's a more appropriate example for understanding the function of the mind. Now, ekatva means one. The mind is only one, but it performs many functions, and it does it so rapidly that it feels as if it's in many places at once. But, and the example is given, you can have 100 flower petals, and piercing them with a needle, it seems like they all get pierced together, but it's actually happening one at a time. Okay, so the mind is pervading throughout our whole body, through our existence. It's in touch with all of the senses, and it's performing many different functions that we are not even really aware of, that we don't even have to be conscious of, because the mind is the seat of consciousness. So these are some of the perspectives on the mind from the perception of Ayurveda. Now, what are the functions of the mind? There are 2 different breakdowns. Sometimes we can talk about a simple breakdown of thinking, feeling, and willing. And there is also this breakdown. And it starts with thinking. You think about something, and then vichar, and then there's the judging, or the uhya, weighing things against each other, setting goals, dhyeya, deciding what I should do, and then sankalpa. Sankalpa means when I'm taking a decision. Swasthya nigraha, to keep control of oneself, to decide what I should do, how I am going to move myself, and finally controlling the organs, indriya nigraha. So this is one way of breaking down the different 6 major functions of the mind. Okay. So thinking, judging, keeping control of the organs, keeping control of the self, taking decisions, and setting goals. So these are the functions: vichar, uhya, indriya nigraha, swasya nigraha, sankalpa, and dhyeya. Now, what are the gunas, or qualities of the mind? This is a very important topic, actually. We have covered this elsewhere. We've covered it in the initial presentation on Sankhya. I want to go into a little bit more depth in it here and talk about sattva, rajas, and tamas. Actually, the colors are not exactly the way I would normally have. I would use the dark blue for tamas, and a kind of a clear yellow for sattva, and a red for rajas. but the words all go together here. So these three gunas, these are the essential components of the mind. You know, we talk about the three doshas, kapha, pitta, vata. Think about the three doshas. They are themselves constituents of the Panchamahabhutas, right? Earth, water, fire, air, and space. And then when we combine them in different ways, so you know, earth plus water is kapha, water and fire is pitta, and the air and space is vata. And you need all three components. You have to have all these. When we say that someone has a prakriti, which is vata, it means that vata is somewhat predominant. It means that their core disposition is slanted toward vata, but all three doshas must be present. Similarly, all three, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are all present in the mind. We require all of these. If we were purely sattvic beings, we would not have any corporeal existence. Rajas and tamas are necessary to have a connection to the body. Now, a person who has cultivated sattva gun, let's talk about what that means. So sattva gun, in this context of these three gunas, this is characterized by intelligence and light and knowledge, enlightenment, compassion, full awareness. So a perfectly balanced mind in a perfectly balanced, a sattvic individual. Again, there will still be a component of rajas and tamas in that person's mind, but when someone is predominated by sattva gun, they see things very clearly. They are not intoxicated or bewildered. They see things with the light of knowledge and in a compassionate way. And they seek to do things that are beneficial for others as well as for the world, and they are very unselfish. So that is a very what we call a sattvic disposition. Sattvic simply is a patronymic of sattva, and it means of or related to sattva gun. The rajogun component of mind, this is the passionate element. So when we talk about our desires to do things, about wanting things, about being motivated to do things, you know, if you listen to a motivational speaker like Tony Robbins, I like Tony Robbins. I think he's very talented. He's very good at motivating people, you know, and getting you to think about things in a different way. It's very much rajogun. It's all about being motivated and you know, having a little bit of the sattvic idea as well, to, you know, find a way to see the higher truths behind things. But really, rajogun is motivational. It's about doing things and getting things done. It's activity, turbulence, disruption. You know, there's this tendency. Now, I want to step back for a minute and imagine that you're a teacher in a classroom, and you have children who, by their diet, by their disposition, by the life that they have at home, they already will have some tendency toward different combinations of these three gunas. So children who are more sattvic, they will be very interested in learning and in knowledge, and they will be very considerate and polite to others. Children who are more influenced by rajogun, they're going to be more disruptive. They're going to be the ones who are making more of a disruption or trying to draw more attention to themselves. And those who are more influenced by tamogun, they are going to have no interest in learning things. They are going to be lazy. They're going to be hard to motivate. It's going to take some work. The thing is that children have the ability to be subject to sanskars. Sanskars means to make impressions. And there's a lot of truth to that, you know, when we are children, the environment that we are exposed to has a lot to do with how we develop. if children are raised with love and compassion, and they are taught to respect others, and they will learn to adopt that. The thing is that children are also really great at seeing through hypocrisy. So if we try to tell children one thing and then show them something else, they just have a shock-proof bullshit detector built in, and they will tend to see through that. So again, let's get back to that example. Think about, you're the teacher in the classroom, and you've got children who have different combinations of these gunas, and children have not necessarily learned how to filter themselves and pretend to be something they're not. What they feel, they're going to tend to do that. So you have these different gunas that are at work. These things are also there in adults as well. We just learn to try to hide them and mask them. And sometimes we say, hey, I'm going to embrace my dark side, and I'm going to be, I'm going to say, hey, I like to be very dark, and I like things that are dark and creepy, and that's the way I am. And I don't need to be clean. The topic of these three gunas, sattva gun, rajogun, and tamogun, this is an extensive topic of discussion. I cannot possibly cover it really extensively, but we could talk about literally for hours. We could talk about the different qualities. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, talks about the different influences of the three gunas on things like the preference for food, the way that people do charity, the way that people speak, the way that people even have their belief system or their faith. These are all influenced by the three gunas. So these are essential components of the mind. We cannot talk about mind in the context of Ayurveda without talking about these three gunas. These are like the three doshas of the mind. And when we want to balance the mind, typically the balanced mind is going to be more sattvic. It's going to be more clear. It's going to be, think about problems like, for example, suicide and other self-destructive behaviors. What guna are they influenced? It is really a very deep influence of tamogun. Now, there are health problems such as depression, and these are real problems. They're not something you can just, people who don't understand them think you can just tell someone to, snap out of it. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because we dig ourselves very deeply in a pit of darkness, and trying to get out of it is very difficult. And usually it can be very, very difficult without help and support. But the Ayurvedic approach is, rather than to try to use drugs that alter the way the brain chemistry works, we do look at diet as a chikitsa, but we will also try to counterbalance and try to change that by moving out of tamogun into rajogun. So, okay, let's get up early in the morning. Let's take a walk. Let's get out in the sunshine. Let's do something. What will this do? This will help get out of tamogun into rajogun. And then from rajogun, while we're out, we're in the light, let's talk. Let's talk about spiritual topics. Let's try to focus. Let's try to move upward and try to understand there's more to life than just the material things, because the bodily part of our existence is more related to tamogun. This is a concept that is prevalent in yoga philosophy, and Ayurveda also holds to that. So when people get sunk deeply into tamogun, we want to try to move them upward out of it. And there's usually a process that's needed for that, and it usually takes time. So this is just to give you kind of a very quick overview of what's the perspective of Ayurveda with these three gunas, and to give you a rough idea what we're talking about, because we're going to talk about sattva, rajas, and tamas again and again. These are the three doshas. These are like the equivalent of, vata, pitta, kapha. Um, they have different implications, and they also have specific connections to our different components. The mind, if you remember from Sankhya, the mind arises from sattva gun. The intelligence arises from ahankar in contact with rajogun, and the tanmatras, or the objects of sense perception, arise from ahankar in contact with tamogun. So living a very worldly, body-focused existence is considered to be a more ignorant, and ignorant is there not necessarily used in the insulting sense of someone who's just, being ignorant. It's the absence of enlightenment. Think of it that way when we're talking about ignorance. So you can say ignorance means an absence, a relative absence of the enlightened focus on spiritual existence. So let's talk a little bit more here, and then we're going to move on to the other presentation. I'm already eating up my time very quickly. So persons with sattvic kaya, they have a very good intellect and memory. They have goodwill. They will allow others to prosper well. They will show patience and courage. When we say sattvic kaya, it means that their body and mind together, they are very more leaning toward the mode of goodness, of sattva gun. They will have interest in music, dance, and poetry. They will be compassionate. They will be devoted to spiritual activities and rituals. They will express purity of their thoughts. They will do good deeds. They will show good power of discrimination. And they will really devote their lives to improving the world, improving the lives of others. The types of food that sattvic persons, they will like things that are sweet, refreshing, and nourishing, things that have ghee, milk, things that are, these are called sattvic ahara because they are considered to be attractive to persons who are in sattva gun. So rajasic, persons with rajasic kaya, they will have the tendency to overpower others. They will have a lot of dynamic energy. They will be ambitious and industrious. Many people will tend to be leaders. They may be hot-tempered. They may be egoistic. They may have bravery along with jealousy. They may become greedy, and they also enjoy taking on different types of physical and verbal disguise. In Rajogun, truthful is not the top priority. Sattvic person is going to be more interested in being truthful, although interestingly, it is said that a characteristic of speech in Sattva gun is, according to Bhagavad Gita, is to speak the truth in a way that does not unnecessarily offend others. Think about that for a moment. Creative and constructive deeds are rajasic in nature. Food that is dear to rajasic persons will be very spicy or very sour. And finally, tamogun. Tamogun characteristics are to be lazy, to be ignorant, to act in a sort of a mad and senseless way, excessively indulging in food and sex, not showing common sense and natural intelligence, avoiding cleanliness, not being health conscious, excessive sleeping, liking to be inactive, being very addicted to intoxication is also a very tamasic quality. Destructive tendencies, violence, theft, these are all tamasic deeds. Tamasic persons will be fond of food that is stale and rotten and unpleasant. So again, this just gives you a general idea of these. So there's a little table here to summarize, and then we're going to go on and go through the other presentation quickly. So Sattva-gun is characterized by intelligence, light of knowledge. Rajogun, activity and turbulence. Tamogun, inertia and darkness. There are bodies which are characterized by Sattva-gun: Arsha, Brahma, Mahendra, Yama, Varuna, Kubera, and Gandharva. Those are the body resembling that of the creator, sages, king of heaven, and others. Rajasikaya is termed as Asura, Rakshasa, Paishachika, Sarpa, Preta, and Shakuna. These are like the very aggressive, very aggressive forms. And Tamogun, Tamasikaya, Pashava, Matsya, Vanaspatya, like a beast or a fish or a tree. Properties of Sattva-gun: good intellect, memory, patience, and courage. So I'm not going to go through all this in detail, but you get the idea. These are things. This is a good, summary that you can study and go over to, remember some of these things that we've discussed. And I think that's as far as I'm going to go on this presentation for today. And then I have another presentation we're going to go through very quickly. And now, okay. So I have actually run out of time. So I'm going to hand things over to Monica, and that's it. Thank you very much. And I hope this was very interesting. Please follow up on the presentation, and we will be following up on the forum for this.